Good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Professor Spooner.
It's been, I think, maybe 3 weeks since we talked last, and a lot has been happening since then because we're in the second term of Obama's presidency, and one assumes that the White House will have a different long-term objective for the second term than the first term, simply because he doesn't have to think about re-election, but the Republicans do. And there's a wide variety of different things been happening, which I presume he must be thinking about. And one thing, obviously, is the amount of inequality in the world and the fact that that is increasing enormously. And that was brought to our attention recently, as I think you mentioned earlier on today, by the disaster in Bangladesh, the number of people in substandard factory situation who were killed, who died. But there's also so many other things going on that have to do with, I think, the difference from one part of the world to another in the rate of involvement in the larger process of globalization.
Well, I would agree with that. In fact, I think we saw 6 months ago the reaction that Apple had when it was forced to take full-page ads in the major newspapers, saying that they, in fact, were going to insist that the Foxconn plant in China maintain improved standards, safety standards for workers. And now the factory in Bangladesh, with the fire over the weekend that killed 115 people, apparently was producing clothes for Wal-mart, Sears, the Disney company, and about 3 or 4 other name brands. And only Wal-mart admitted to knowing about the safety conditions there and said publicly that they had banned suppliers from ordering goods from there, and that a supplier had been ordering on their behalf without their knowledge. So the inequality is rampant. And
it's going to be very difficult to simply change the situation by legislation because
it has no effect.
As you just said, it's suppliers rather than direct control. And so one's dealing with regulations in this country for production, overseas production in situations which are legally controlled by other authorities. And it's difficult to see how that's going to change. And there are many countries in the world, and especially now in Africa, apart from a few in South Asia, where the people in charge of the government are doing their best to get the contracts without any thought at all for the conditions of the people who are actually doing the work. And I think that my understanding of the way things are working is that these things will change gradually, as simply as the people who are doing the work, the ordinary people in places like Bangladesh or countries in Africa, they will become more aware of what other people have in other countries because of the tremendous growth in the way information is spreading. And they won't put up with it, so it'll be forced from the ground up. And that will be much more efficient than us trying to reinforce it from legally from the top down.
I completely agree with you. In fact, I think if you look at what's going on in China today, with the growth of the middle class, such as it is, and the access to the internet, censored or uncensored, there is that craving that people have. What about me? Why can't we have these sorts of things too? And in fact, the Party Congress that just finished last week, I mean, that was one of the big themes. They need to do something to take care of this middle class. They can't leave them feeling disenfranchised any longer. Because, of course, it's a potential revolution for them. But also, from their perspective, it's simply the law of big numbers. I mean, you've got 600, 700, 800 million people that are moving toward this position of some sort of economic improvement. And what are you going to do with them? I mean, you can't just keep shutting the gate with them.
The problem is that it's one thing to see the process in the long term, which can perhaps give us some grounds for optimism, but the reactions are always going to be synchronic in the short term. People who want what other people have and keeping that discontent within bounds and doing something to satisfy it week by week, month by month, is likely to cause serious problems.
Well, that's true, and I certainly don't need to say this to you as an anthropologist, but the speed at which this is occurring is unbelievable. I mean, simply to be able to have had the conversation that we just had about Bangladesh and China would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. I mean, who would have cared about a factory fire in Bangladesh 20 years ago? There would have been no goods being imported from that factory into the West.
And we probably wouldn't have heard about it.
Of course not. I mean, even so, the story was not exactly well publicized. It was small Ag print within newspapers. But it made the business pages. It made the business pages. It wasn't necessarily a news story. But the supplier indications reached the press and the business pages.
And it's all conditioned by the fact that Bangladesh does not get good press in this country or Western countries generally. And it's a neighbor of India, which always gets a good press, and yet has similar conditions. So there's this sort of differentiation going on all the time as well. I wonder do you have any other examples in mind of this sort of thing? Because the main other things that I have in mind have to do with the conflicts, which seem to be spreading and getting more serious.
Conflict. Just this morning, the Syrian government, for the first time since the outbreaks of violence occurred, have shut down the internet for the entire country. So, I mean, the whole discussion now is apropos. They want to shut off any access to information. There's communication with news agencies, with the rebel leaders via satellite phone. But if you're in Syria right now, your email, your access to the web and everything is shot. You can't get to it.
Which means that presumably Syria has one backbone entry into the country for internet use in the whole country.
Well, they may or may not have one or two, but there's certainly one or two switches that the government's capable of throwing.
Yeah, I wonder how many countries have that capability.
I think if I remember correctly, and I've seen this before, the Internet trunk lines map. There's a line that comes ashore in the Mediterranean, somewhere in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. I don't know if it comes ashore in Cairo. I would imagine that it does. There might be feeder lines that come ashore elsewhere, and then there's another line that it's a land line that branches from India. So at the most, they have 2 points of ingress.
Yes, it's amazing how difficult it is to get good detailed information on the hardware of the international internet. And especially it's surprising that we don't have more information on it because of everything one reads in the press about what, for example, the Chinese are trying to do internally, or what the Iranians are trying to do internally. And one suspects that it won't be too long before national governments will not be able to control internet access for everybody within a certain area.
No, I would agree with that. And in fact, during Mubarak's final days in Cairo, the Egyptians shut the internet off for about 3 days, and that was pretty much the final catalyst that pushed everything over the edge. So we'll see what happens here. Yeah. I also did notice, to go back to your earlier theme about this being the advent of Obama's second term, there was a lengthy article in the New York Times yesterday about the United States beginning to modify and rethink its approach to the Syrian rebels.
Yeah.
Even going so far as considering endorsing the Turkish request of NATO to place anti-aircraft batteries in southern Turkey, and then possibly, I mean, the article mentioned this, placing CIA officers in Syria.
Yes. But Obama has so many things to think about in the Middle East because, well, tomorrow the Palestinians are going to present their case for an enhanced status in the United Nations, which now has the backing of France.
And Canada.
Canada is, what should I say, has standing but not much clout.
Right, right.
France has more clout.
But not much standing. Yeah, we shouldn't say that, right?
Because, I mean, the Economist thinks that France is going to be the next basket case in Europe.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that everything is connected to everything else, and in the Middle East is now much more obviously extending from Afghanistan into North Africa, and problems are cropping up everywhere. And as far as we can see, Obama still has the same advisors as he had for his first term. There were good political reasons for him keeping the previous advisors for his first term, but not the same case for keeping them on into the second term. He's about to choose a new Secretary of State, and the chances are that the advisors will change. And somewhere I saw an argument that he was about to begin a total rethink of the whole Middle East policy. So it's possible a lot of things are going to change very fast in terms of the way the Middle East is presented, the cluster of Middle Eastern problems are presented to us.
Well, I think in no small way that's going to rest also upon the Israeli elections in the third week of January. I think that the former foreign minister, that woman, whose name escapes me right now,
Livni or something like that.
Yes, who just announced that she's going to form a coalition party and run against Netanyahu. She could win.
You really think so?
I do. She's an old Begin protege, Sharon protege from way back when.
That would be really quite amazing if she did win.
Well, there is precedent, obviously. Golda Meir led the country for a long time.
Yes. And, not because of the gender, but simply because of the recent machinations of Netanyahu to stay in power. And nobody's really been suggesting that he's likely to lose, I don't think. And the statement of the Israeli ambassador to the UN this morning or yesterday about the stupidity of the Palestinians trying to present this case tomorrow suggested arrogance on the part of the current government.
Well, I think, and I'm no expert on internal Israeli politics, but I would have to think that thinking Israelis have already reconciled themselves to the existence of a Palestinian state, all right, whether it's in Gaza or whether it's going to be as part of Gaza and part of the West Bank, I don't know which. But that has to be understood to be a reality. All right? And the next point is, why fight it? Maybe if we agree and come to peace with the Palestinians and Abbas, maybe the tension level will decrease significantly.
Well, there's got to be a resolution of the problem of the Israeli settlers.
Yes, indeed.
And the right of return.
And she, Levy, when she was the Attorney General of Israel 4 years ago, when she was, I saw this actually on 60 Minutes, she was interviewed. And it was at the time when the Israeli Supreme Court was considering whether or not they were going to evict the settlers from the occupied land. And whomever it was interviewing her asked her a direct question, what would you do then? She said, they would be removed. We would get the police and the army, and they would physically be removed. That would be my duty. So she's prepared to take those kinds of steps. And I mean, those kinds of steps have to be taken. I mean, there's going to have to be give on both sides, I'm afraid.
Well, if Obama is able to make some progress on that, that really will give him a place in history after the last 60 years. And the problem is now, I mean, it's beginning to extend more and more broadly.
Yes.
India is involved in what's going on, as well as all the usual countries. So, and of course, it's all connected to America's position in the world generally, in the way the proverbial man in the street in different countries thinks about America and what America's chances are of getting its way in other issues.
What did you think about Obama's quick 72-hour trip to Asia?
I thought that it was announced more or less as a surprise that he was spending less than a day in Burma,
right?
Which he had a reason to go there, which was on the international calendar, some sort of meeting, wasn't it?
I think the meeting was in Cambodia.
Yeah, and then he took the opportunity to stop
to see Aung San Suu Kyi.
One is always a little worried that Aung San Suu Kyi is such a charismatic figure that anything that can be linked to her is good for one's press image.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, so the reasons for him going there may not be as good as you first think they are, because there are so many problems that have to be sorted out in Burma, ethnic problems, which the resolution for which is totally unclear at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's never been a nationally integrated population. And there's no sign of any way of making it a nationally integrated population. And of course, the more open it becomes, the worse the problems are going to become.
Mm-hmm.
Any reason the ethnic problems have been kept under a lid so far is that the lid has been pushed down very hard from the top.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, the fact that Obama went there is very good. But it could reverberate in negative ways within the foreseeable future.
I've always had high hopes for Burma. When I was growing up, one of the names I heard on television frequently was U Thant.
Yeah.
The Secretary General, I believe he was the successor to Dag Hammarskjöld.
Yeah.
At the United Nations, and I mean, that was so long ago. And I mean, for him to have been a Burmese back in the early '60s, that was a position of some.
Well, but it wasn't until, I mean, it was about the time that he became internationally well known that Burma went under this autocratic rule, which has lasted so long. And before that, Burma had a very different image.
Yes.
I mean, it's the site of one of the three best colonial era novels. By, who's it by? There's one by Leonard Woolf, one by E.M. Forster, and who's the third one by in Burma? And I can't even think what it's called now.
I don't know, but I'll find out. I'll find out and I'll read it by next week.
Anyway, but it makes it very interesting to see how the international image of countries can totally change and change again.
Yes, yes. Just in this time frame, from U Thant to the military, and then now with Aung San Suu Kyi, it's spun around again.
So I think we've covered Obama's agenda for the next 4 years.
Well, we'll put this in a zip file and send it to the White House.
Good. See you next week.
All right, Professor. Thanks very much.